name is Luis Sosa. I'm a research analyst for the Circular Jobs Initiative here at Circle Economy, and I will be moderating today's event. I am delighted to be joined by Natalia Papu-Carrone, research analyst of the textiles program here at Circle Economy, and co-author of the Putting Circular Textiles to Work report. Also by our three expert speakers. First, Chris Bacchus, research manager at the HIVA Research Institute of the University of Leuven. Tammy Schweisler, managing director at Makers Unite, who also supports this research as a company that let us explore a little bit further through a case study. And Troy Nightgold, professor of fashion research and technology at the Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences. I would like to thank also, obviously, the Ghost Meeting Foundation, who supports this event, and in general, the work undertaken by the Circular Jobs Initiative. Very briefly, and outlining the agenda for today, I will give a short introduction to the topic, followed by Natalia Papu, who will present the research findings. Right after that, we will move on to the panel discussion. As main topics to be discussed today, we will have first, which value chain stages yield the most potential for a circular economy in the Netherlands. In second place, which skills and jobs will be in demand in a circular future, and how can organizations skill and reskill workers? And finally, how can we ensure that no workers are left behind in the transition? After the panel discussion, we will open the microphone to our audience for your questions. We will wrap up the event by giving some closing remarks. Before diving into the topic, the discussion, just a short note on housekeeping. We will save all your questions, the Q&A after the panel discussion. Please post any questions you have for our panelists or our presenter in the chat box and indicate who you are directing your question to. This event is being recorded, and so please express any issues you have with this in the chat box. Please all remain muted unless I invite you to take the microphone during the Q&A. And finally, if you experience any technical issues, please post this in the chat box and our team will help you as best as they can. Okay, being said that, it's time to dive into our topic. Here we are to discuss what opportunities a circular transition might bring to the clothing value chain, and how we need to prepare the workforce for making sure that a future clothing industry is possible. The Netherlands has set the ambitious goal of full circularity by 2050 and half resource consumption by 2030, necessitating change that spans sectors and industries. A systemic shift in the clothing industry can deliver substantial impact and edge us closer to meeting the government's overall circular and social goals, aiming to create new jobs and valorize and upscale existing ones. Currently, the Dutch clothing value chain employs more than 127,000 FTEs, full-time employment, in the clothing value chain. The bulk of these jobs, around 94%, are in the retail and distribution stage. Only around 1% of jobs can be classed as core circular jobs. These crop up in the value chain in the repair, waste, and resource management sectors, including decorating and sorting. In terms of skill gaps, in a fully circular textile scenario, new jobs in the repair sector will emerge, from remanufacturing designers to employers that can assess the quality of second-hand garments. Research collection, managers, and technical, associate, and professional level workers in technology and e-commerce will come to the fore in resale, while increased collection and sorting will see a boost in the number of textile collectors and sorters. For the introduction, I will hand over to Natalia, who will dive deeper into the findings of our report. Please, Natalia.
Thank you very much, Luis. Well, basically, as you mentioned previously through this webinar, we aim to share some of the key results that we obtained through our Putting Circular Textiles to Work project. that has been running over the past years. And this was made possible with the support of the Goldschmieding Foundation. So basically the aim of this project was to understand and design an optimal circular clothing value chain that keeps both resources and people functioning at their highest possible value. Therefore, we conducted an employment effects analysis in collaboration with our research partners, HIVA from the University of Leuven in Belgium, as well as a skills analysis, an analysis of skills needs in this circular value chains. And we deep dived into a specific case of analysis with our partners Makers Unite, a textile-based creative agency based in Amsterdam with a strong focus and a strong mission for social inclusion. So if we can go to the next slide, just to summarize, and as Luis already presented it just a few moments ago, looking into the process we went through, we first needed to map and understand what the current clothing value chain in the Netherlands looks like. And what we found is that in 2019, the total employment in the sector was around 127,000 full-time equivalents. Retail and distribution represented most of it, so 94%, and textile collection and sorting accounted for less than 1% of the total employment of the value chain. And these are two activities that really become very relevant if we want to realize a circular clothing sector by 2050. We could also see that there's comparatively a small fiber, textile, and clothing industry that still remains within the Netherlands, but that is mostly focused on technical fibers and household textiles. Still, approximately 6 kilotons of clothing are being locally produced each year, which accounts for around 1,400 FTEs, including fiber, textile, and clothing manufacturing that can be assigned to the clothing value chain per se. If we go to the next slide. So together with industry stakeholders, what we did was develop 3 scenarios to test these assumptions for a circular transition towards 2050. And these scenarios were intended to have a specific focus in the value chain in order to attribute specific employment effects to particular strategies. So through an input-output model for the clothing value chain, we quantified first job impact. And these 3 scenarios, the first scenario was aimed at scaling changes in consumption patterns, such as reduced first-hand consumption, increased lifetime extension through business-to-customer repair, through leasing and renting. The second scenario was more aimed at increasing significantly the amount of textiles collected at the end of use and prioritizing local reuse, many times enabled by business-to-business repairs. The third scenario was aimed at increasing significantly the amount of textiles collected as well at the end of use, but showing the potential of scaling recycling operations and local fiber processing in the Netherlands. So what we can see in the slide are the results of the employment potential according to the parameters and assumptions we made for each scenario. Basically, what we can see is that the second scenario, the one prioritizing clothing reuse, has been identified in this context as the most desirable scenario based on the potential job creation, 25% more jobs than in a business as usual scenario for 2050. Of course, we understand that none of these scenarios on its own are ambitioned as the best in terms of how to achieve circularity, but rather they show different flavors or strategies on how to get there. The intention with this, as I said, it was able to assign causality to the employment effects of each focus, but probably the best scenario, both environmentally and socially as a whole, is somewhat a combination of all 3 scenarios that we present in the study. So looking a bit of a deep dive into the prioritizing reuse scenario, what we can observe from the scenario is that this 25% potential, over 24,000 FTEs are attributed to repair and maintenance sectors. So there's a huge growth in this value chain stages. And a strong potential of shifting around 17,000 FTEs from new to from first to second-hand sales. And as the amount of clothing collected goes up and increases, and the focus is on the reuse in the scenario, the sorting operations are also expected to almost quadruplicate the current amount of FTEs at this stage. Moving on to the next slide. So following the employment effects analysis that, of course, you can read more in depth in the study, and we will have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. But following this employment effects, what we conducted is a skills analysis for the present and the future needs of the clothing sector in the Netherlands. And to really understand, based on the most promising scenario in terms of employment effects, what would be the skills needs for this to happen. Therefore, the focus of this analysis, of the skills analysis, has been placed on clothing repair, on clothing reuse, collection, and sorting activities. The current skills demanded for this value chain have been assessed through a descriptive analysis of current job listings, and data was compiled from 2019 from the sectors. And what we can see is that for all the three value chain stages, the type of skill sets required is mostly practical, although this is more prominent at collection and sorting stages, while the repair stages require a more blended approach of theoretical and practical skills. And this also goes hand in hand in terms of the level of education required, where it is observed that for repair, mostly tertiary level education is required in the job listings, while in collection and sorting, there's quite balanced split between secondary and tertiary levels of education. If we go to the next slide. What we did was also look into the future roles and the future skills needs in this second scenario. So we have identified these by rolling out a qualitative content analysis of around 20 interviews with stakeholders across the clothing sector, the educational sector, and government. And following this analysis, a number of insights emerged on new roles and skills that our circular clothing scenario will require. So we can see, and as Luis already mentioned in the introduction, new roles emerging in the repair maintenance stages as remanufacturing designers, the need for more quality assessment, elementary workers, really understanding the reusability of incoming clothing and being able to plan for an uncertain flow of feedstock coming along. In resale, we see really an increase and new roles in resale collection managers within brands, for example, and also an emergence of associate and professional roles in technology and in e-commerce linked to resale. And in terms of collection and sorting, basically an extensive, very, very high increase in the number of textile sorters and textile collectors required for this scenario to materialize, and a large presence needed of managerial roles, which are also linked with skills required for managing people with a distance to the labor market, which is one of the potential recommendations to continue embedding further at these stages. And finally, just to share in our last slide, some of the challenges and barriers ahead that we identified. We did identify throughout the skills analysis that there's lack of training in sustainability to really develop sustainable production and operate environmentally friendly technologies. And that sometimes the amount of guidance and on-the-job training needed for this role transition is smaller than than it actually needs to be. So more investment in this regard is needed. Skills shortages in the Netherlands are expected mostly in skilled trade jobs. As we know, production moved mostly away from the Netherlands a few decades ago. And as the repair sectors and the maintenance sectors are expected to grow significantly, skills shortages in these areas are expected. And basically also looking into opportunities for people with a distance currently to the labor market, we see there's a big opportunity in really setting up roles and skills needs intentionally to really fit the requirements and be suitable for different vulnerable worker groups and specific characteristics. So there we do see an opportunity of how this skills and job profiles can be created for this future scenario and can be adjusted to match a broader group of workers. And just as a last reflection, the really very important need to upskill and reskill the workforce that needs a completely collaborative approach. All stakeholders involved in the sector really have a role to play there, and we do expect a lot of good discussion also coming forward in the next hour as we bring stakeholders from different perspectives together to join the discussion. So with this, I leave it to Luis back again. And we'll take some questions in the Q&A, and if we don't manage to address all of those questions, we will take them up in a follow-up. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Natalia, for such a thorough explanation of these research findings. I think now it's time to move on to the panel discussion. I would like to remind the audience, just as Natalia said a moment ago, if you have any questions, please write them down in the chat box. We will try to answer them during the Q&A. Natalia will stay here with us. Now I would like to introduce our panel experts. In first place, Chris Bacchus. Chris is the research manager at HIVA, University of Leuven. Chris has been in this role in climate and sustainability since 2002. He holds a PhD in social science and a master's degree in economics. Throughout the years, he has conducted and coordinated many research projects commissioned by the European Union, Belgian, federal, and Flemish government agencies. Chris is also the coordinator of the Horizon 2020 project called Machina on the maker movement and the circular economy. He's also the promoter of the research line, Employment and Circular Economy of the Flemish Policy Research Center for Circular Economy. Chris, furthermore, has expertise in environmental taxation, sustainability transitions, climate finance, environmental policy evaluation, and climate policy. Thank you, Chris, for being here with us. Second place, we have Troy Noitgol. Troy is professor of fashion research and technology at the Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences. Troy received his PhD in December 2019 at Eindhoven University of Technology. He was educated at the Fashion Institute of Technology at the University of New York, after which he designed for major fashion brands in Florence, Italy. This led him to fashion research, into digital production, sustainability, and collaboration with the leading design courses in Italy. Troy is also at the crossroads of fashion, IT, and creative technology. He experiments, designs, develops software, and analyzes data to arrive at new methods and tools. Finally, Troy has worked with leading innovators in the fashion industry who have blurred the lines between marketing and creativity, creating a strong affinity with the role of branding and management in the future of fashion. Thank you, Troy, for being here with us. And Tammy Schweichler is managing director at Makers Unite. Tammy is a social entrepreneur focused on design for social innovation. After obtaining a master's degree in design, social innovation at the French National Institute for Advanced Studies in Industrial Design in Paris, Tammy participated in the development of Connexi, a social enterprise aiming to improve road safety and provide entrepreneurship opportunities for motorcycle taxi drivers in Kenya. At the end of 2015, Tammy co-founded Makers Unite, a social enterprise producing sustainable accessories to provide employment opportunities for newcomers with a refugee background. The startup is winner of the What Design Can Do Refugee Challenge, and up to now has benefited hundreds of newcomers in the Netherlands. As director of Makers Unite, Tammy is now focused on setting new models for integration in Europe and sharing the power of making for more inclusive societies worldwide. I will stop sharing the slides, and I would like to now go to our panel discussion. Our first topic to discuss is regarding the value chain stages that could yield the most potential for a circular economy in the Netherlands. Just a brief introduction to the topic. We see in our research that further broadening and scaling of end-of-use activities such as textile collection and sorting are expected if the industry pretends to become more circular. Sorting, for example, will be essential in developing more nuance in the sector in terms of new parameters and categories, from differentiating materials and stocks from specific brands to sorting according to the repairability of garments. Knowledge of different material compositions, brands, and their subsidiaries, and the ability to judge the repairability of clothing and its potential for repair will become more and more important. Before we hear from our speakers, I wanted to kick off with a quick poll for the audience. I don't know if we have the, yeah, thank you. This is the question for you. To support the transition to a circular economy, which kind of use activity in the textile sector must change its operations the most? We have here different options. If you please can give you an answer, I will give you 1 minute or so to put in your answers. Okay. I think we are going to move now to our first panel question. Thank you so much for your answers. Textile collection appears to be the most important end-of-use activity in order to make this circular transition possible. I think we agree with that. It's one of our main findings in the report. Okay, so now my first question is for Chris. Chris, you led the development of the scenario modeling of employment effects in this project. Would you please reflect on the results in relation to the end of use of the value chain and the opportunity for job creation observed at these stages? Is there any value change stage that you would like to highlight? Please, Chris, all yours.
Yes, thanks a lot, Luis, for the invitation and for your kind question. Yes, I did see some interesting observations from the scenario building and scenarios we run. So first of all, maybe I should also remark that although the net effect, job effect expected from the circular economy is positive in all scenarios, we do see some differences, and in some parts or some chains of the value chain, jobs could be lost. This is mainly the case for retail and distribution sector, where the bulk of the jobs is located right now. And on the other hand, the reason why the net effect is still positive is that obviously on the one hand, you have the scenario or scenarios that are based on repair and reuse. obviously their repair and reuse jobs will boost. But at the same time, you see kind of what I would call a diversification of jobs throughout the value chain of textiles. With this, I mean that in the scenario in which is based on mainly reuse and repair, also most of the other end of use scenarios get at least some increase in their jobs. They include sorting and collection and some others. So you could say that all the other parts of the value chain, which end of life may have been underdeveloped up to now, will develop further, and the end result will be a value chain with better distribution of all the jobs, moving to other end of life strategies. So that was a really interesting result to capture from the analysis.
Thank you very much, Chris. My next question is for Troy. Troy, reflecting upon the changing operations at the end of use of the textile supply chain in order to develop circular and sustainable fashion systems, what role do you believe technology and innovation has to or could play in this space? Please go ahead, Troy.
Yeah, thanks, Louis. It's a very interesting system that you put together. I mean, I enjoy it quite a lot, having done quite a lot of similar work in the area. So really good and interesting research being done here. I think the role of technology is interesting in the fact that it allows us to first look chemically and to look at a very detailed level at the textiles as to what we can do with them. We need to find new ways to find second and third lives for most of the materials that we're working with, if not getting them into circles where we can go 20 cycles, at least before they really do mechanically wear out. And I think that's something that we don't do currently. We end up using materials that can't be recycled very easily. Thus the garbage in, garbage out policy applies. So we've been doing a really interesting postdoc with Maaike Fietsma here at Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences, where we're looking at ancestral, indigenous, and archaic technologies. Because if we think about technologies from long ago, they seem to do it better than we're currently doing it. And the systems were already more circular than the systems we currently live inside. So this idea of being technological is also balanced very much with finding technologies from societies that have gone away and are no longer existent, because they did have more of a circular relationship. So I think it's an interesting moment to be putting technological advancement into context with other forms of society that we have already experimented with as a humanity, to really try to find these moments and places that these things can and will work. To balance that out, I think we see a lot of talent in the Netherlands coming in, especially with immigrants in the construction sector in terms of textile construction, people who can sew, people who can really do some amazing things in terms of tailoring, and finding ways to bring them into this, I think, are really key. And so this idea of perhaps building systems that allow us to communicate better with the talent that's currently out there. So as a designer, I can get to a tailor who perhaps we don't speak the same language, but something about an interface technologically can allow me to share the patterns that I'm designing, get feedback from the person who's sewing them as to how sewable they are. And so there's this moment with ICT that I think we really have this moment to create new companies that connect us to talent much better, connect designers to talent, to marketing and branding in new and interesting ways, so that we can really find ways to not just make these systems localized, which is very important to get these very local to the individuals, but also to distribute certain parts of it. Distributing the knowledge becomes very important in those systems. So how can we figure out what parts of the system need to be distributed, i.e. the knowledge that we can share between people, and what needs to be localized. So the designer can still be far away from you if we want them to be, but the tailor is right next door. And figuring out those relationships with stakeholders, I think, is the real promise of technology now. I'll leave it at that.
Yes, super interesting. Super interesting. I'm curious to hear more about this ancestral technologies research that you are currently implementing. But yeah, I mean, I think that's something that probably we could retake as part of this exploration of alternatives for the circular transition as part of this the future of the clothing industry. Thank you so much. I would like to move now to our second topic. And also I would like to remind you to all our audience about putting down your questions in the chat box. Our second topic is about the skills and jobs that will be in demand in a circular future and how can organizations skill and reskill workers. Let's focus on our desirable scenario, reuse. In an industry focused on reuse, we have observed that remanufacturing designers will be essential for creating value out of a new, increasing and ever-changing material stream of used textiles. These designers will need to be supported by a large number of skilled trade workers for disassembly, repair, and maintenance activities, such as tailoring or sewing. Although some of these skills are already cropping up in the Dutch labor market, their presence is limited and will require some growth. Interdisciplinary skills that enable collaboration across disciplines, departments, and organizations are essential for the transition to a circular clothing industry. Roles that act as linking pins or bridges between diverse. I would like to put now a second poll question, please, for our audience. If you can help us, please, Natalia. Thank you. This is the second question. A circular clothing sector by 2050 calls for further development of transversal skills. Which of these skill sets do you think organizations in the sector need to focus on the most to up or reskill their employees? We have 1 minute to answer this question, please. Thank you so much for your answers. I think we have yes, green skills as the most important category here to develop in this future clothing value chain. This is really interesting. I think the category of green skills is still something that needs to be further explored. Sometimes it's quite similar to the current categories that you can find, let's say, in the ESCO classifications, but I think we are in an ongoing process of developing more and more these type of categories that can be better fit to what we need in terms of circular fields and circular sectors in the future. I would like to move now to our next set of questions. The first one is for Tammy. Tammy, while assessing the current and future operations of Makers Unite and its impact on jobs and skills needed for a circular clothing industry, you constantly reaffirm the importance of focusing on new business models. Why do you believe innovation and technology development are key to these circular business models?
Thanks for the question, Luis. Good afternoon, everybody. Well, what we see in the development from linear business models or circular business models is the importance of collaboration and interdisciplinary connection. If you're going to analyze, for instance, what is going to take to scale operational sustainability in these new business models, we're often talking about, for instance, software connections, or talking about a different type of skills, not specifically today sitting on the circular, on the textile industry. When we take them all together, we see a new set of stakeholders that are benefited by this new value chain creation. We're talking about, for instance, the creation of jobs that benefits people from this into the labor market. So that provides a return for the taxpayer, that provides a return to governments. We're looking into the connection to education sectors. We're looking into the development of new technologies for production. I find really relevant that that the benefit, the total cost, we call it also total cost of ownership or total value chain creation, that we're looking the creation of new business models from this return point as perspective. So by the moment I try to understand that the transactions are not anymore direct one-to-one, so brands selling to consumers, consumers paying brands. We're looking into a broad spectrum of value creation. We also understand that it is necessary to rethink the ways we operate the different flows, the revenue flows, the skill creation flows over the chain. So I think it's going to be really relevant for new business models that understand collaboration, the knowledge diversification, and also the sharing of skills as part of the core business models to remain also competitive and relevant in this new scenario.
Thank you very much, Tammy. I think it's really interesting, and I do agree that perhaps this digital revolution also helped you to kind of think about these different type of let's say connections between client and also enterprises. It's easier now to have more people coming into your different options as a company or as an entrepreneur when you have, let's say, digital platforms at hand in this moment. So super interesting. Thank you very much. I'm gonna go back now to Troy. This question is about your role as an educator and researcher, and how do you believe that digital skills can be further developed across the industry while reskilling or upskilling workers already active in the sector? Since your perspective as educator and researcher, please, Troy.
Yeah, Luis, thanks for that question. I think it's really important that we realize that the current tools that we're using and the current tools that we've created are all based upon the current fashion system. And so we really have to rebuild the tools almost from ground up, or rebuild them in new and different ways. I have a couple of researchers. One of them is my data as a material researcher that's looking at data as like, how does data become a material that fashion designers can understand? But ideas such as inclusivity start to become very important there, because so often the fashion designers these days only design and only have designed for the past 50 years on a model size 8. So just the standard size 36 dress form, or the size 8, you know, the 38 shoe. And so they are so accustomed to only seeing fashion in a one specific way. And so any kind of technology that allows us to actually show them what that would look like on different kinds of people, or to show them what it will look like over time. How do we expect a garment to change with age? How do we expect a garment to change with use? You know, we only design the garments for the point of sale anymore, but we never design the garment for its entire lifetime, much less its second and third and fourth timeline. Some people think about this in re-dyeing clothing, and there's a very specific sector that does look at this really closely, but bring that down to the actual conception of each object and the reconception of each object, I think is really important. And that we're not just designing for a person, we're designing for lots of kinds of people, but we're not designing only for that moment of sale. We're designing for that lifetime of the garment, but also for the lifetime of the person. We're starting to understand what kind of garments they need in their wardrobe decade after decade after decade after decade, and designing that in that moment becomes a really interesting question, which also allows us to start asking questions of what is the relationship then? If we're going to be thinking about a lifetime of clothes for someone, or a lifetime of shoes, what does that lifetime relationship look like? And that's where I think that we can, in software and technology, especially now that we have some better abilities using some data science and AI models to really understand how different people age and how they wear their clothes differently, and having the AIs looking at that clothing once it's been worn and giving us some data and information back about that, we really start to think about lifetimes of human people, or human lifetimes, and maybe even larger than human lifetimes, which was something that was never possible before this moment.
Thank you, Tori. Super interesting, this concept of designing, having in mind lifetime of a person rather than of a product, of a garment, right? This is like, this is what we are facing in this moment in terms of, let's say, fashion industry, that probably that lifetime is just a couple of months, 3 months, right? So
if we look at shoes specifically, Louis, mechanically, if you look at how the materials are, the worst materials would mean that you would need about, that the shoe would last about 1 million cycles. Now that's about a year and a half on just SBR rubber. That means you need 80 pairs of shoes in your life, back to the napkin math. Yeah. Most people own 360 pairs of shoes in a lifetime. There's a desperate mismatch here that we really could start to solve if we just put our minds to it.
Definitely, definitely. Thank you so much. I would like to move now to our third and final topic of this panel discussion. This is a hot topic in the labor markets development. This is about about the transition of the circular economy, but also about not leaving workers behind. Here I'm referring to probably people that are considered vulnerable and distant to the labor market. Brief introduction about this topic. When looking at managerial roles within resale and sorting, we have observed an increased need for social work managers that are properly skilled and trained to manage a diverse workforce. These require excellent people management skills and a good variety of social and listening skills, and an understanding of the needs of different vulnerable worker groups. Here our third poll question for our audience. In your opinion, what do you think the main challenges are today in ensuring workplace integration for people with a distance to the labor market in the clothing value chain? 1 minute to answer, please. Thank you so much for your answers. Here, I would say a clear winner is a lack of managerial support and guidance. Probably I would say here as well that perhaps the key is to teach or to train managers to also consider these aspects of having in mind vulnerable workers when they are managing their different teams and the diverse background that you can face whenever, for instance, when you are also dealing with newcomers, such as in the case of Makers Unite. I will go now with my first question. This one is for Chris. Chris, you have previously conducted extensive research on resale businesses in the Flanders region of Belgium. There are certain similarities between the demography and the consumption behavior between Flanders and the Netherlands. What can we learn from that research in terms of resale business models and their potential for labor market integration programs?
Yes, thanks, Luis. I think the reason why this study we did was interesting because it like completely changed the way we view reuse, the phenomenon of reuse, and the way we measure it. Before our study, we used to measure reuse in terms of the sales of this social economy company network that is supported by government, who have second-hand sales, and for which we had like perfect data. So that was used as the indicator for reuse for Flanders. But this is only one channel through which reuse is realized. So now we did a more extensive study to have a look on at all the other reuse channels. And we found that in the end, the total amount of reuse is like 6 times higher than we previously had estimated. So now the government can use this new indicator to follow up on the phenomenon of reuse. What also came out of that study is that more than 50% of all second-hand goods and all reuse is realized through informal channels. So people like friends and family exchanging clothes and other consumer goods. So this is more than half of the total, obviously. So that's an important phenomenon. It may not create additional jobs or not directly in any way, but it's still an important phenomenon for the circular economy, and also it's a desirable effect that this is taking place in the informal economy as well. But of course, if we look at the more circular economy, growth can be expected for both formal and informal second-hand or resale channels. And we see that we expect growth in both areas to be very significant. And what we learned from our study is that there's really great potential in having more people with a distance to the labor market to take opportunities from this. So coming back to this network of social economy companies we have in Flanders, which is very successful, I would say, and which already gives employment to about almost 5,000 people, most of which have a distance to the labor market. So, and this could further grow strongly by extending the activities they're already doing, but also by adding other circular economy related activities maybe to their portfolio. And the most logical example would be repair. Repair can be offered as a combination with resale. First you repair it and then you resale it. It could also be a separate business model. It could be like a subcontracting for regular economy companies, thus increasing the collaboration between social economy and regular economy. And there are several other new business models that could be used to combine the original reuse activity of the reuse centers, which could greatly increase the employment for vulnerable workers. Of course, to the condition that the government follows this growth and is willing to provide more subsidies, because the more people are employed in this sector, the more subsidies are needed to support these contracts. And this is where the current bottleneck is in Flanders. So it remains to be seen if governments are willing to step into this, yes, high potential type of solution, I would say.
Thank you so much, Chris. I would say that here in the Netherlands, probably the discussion is also is going in the same direction. If you see right now, for instance, in our report, we shared some findings about some companies that are working, but mostly in the collection of and sorting activities. They are helping also vulnerable workers, but I fully agree that we can also kind of incorporate this type of workers in other type of business models, not only in collection and sorting. Definitely. Thank you so much. My final direct question is for Tammy. Tammy, social inclusion is one of the key pillars of Makers Unite. What are the challenges currently of the focus of your social enterprise in migrant work integration, and what opportunities do you see to ensure that this focus can continue scaling within a fully circular model?
Thanks, Luis. Well, when looking into migrant integration through work, a pillar of our processes are related to alignment of personal skills of their current skill sets to the labor market in the Netherlands. And this comes from understanding the recognition of the talents in itself, the recognition in a system that could work for them and with them, and let's say the understanding, okay, what do I have to do my own career, personal challenges in order to adapt to what is available in this local market. We do this today mostly focused on the creative industry because there's an alignment on accessibility. So what we see forming and the opportunity that is arising with the circular textile sector is related to skills, to skill. The adaptability of their skill sets to standards, for instance, of international fashion production quality control. To skills that are going beyond the hardware and entering into IT and development of solutions for integration into, for instance, procurement and logistics systems, or and an important topic that Troy mentioned, which is really relevant, that we see a huge opportunity, is the connection with their skill sets to the upcoming and booming digital skill sets of let's say the new young educational programs. So we see that when there's alignment on the hardware into the software, there are new opportunities can arise. What we find important is that there are qualification programs that can be established in order for these programs to exist. I find at this moment that there's a lot of benefit that can be created throughout the chain, and not necessarily that the end consumer has to own the cost of this value creation. I believe there's a whole opportunity for governments to be investing into skill capacitation and digitalization skills for the circular textile industry, for migrant working force, because the return that it provides, at least to our initial analysis, is very big. We see by the reports of the results, it's by far the sector. For instance, while we're looking into the at-scale repair segment, yeah, we're talking about 2,000% growth in the current market. So it is an interesting opportunity to be looking into a broader spectrum. And last but not least, the importance of being included as a person. When you feel that you belong to an activity that recognizes you as a human that has talent and skills, that's a starting point for social acquisition to coexist. And I believe that circular textile industry has the right sector and the right mindset to provide this to newcomers.
Thank you very much, Sammy. I would like to close the panel discussion with a final question for all of you. It's an open question for the three expert speakers. In 1 minute, please, if all of you can summarize, what would you say should the clothing industry in the Netherlands focus on in order to become fully circular by 2050? I would like to start with you, Tammy, please. Then with Troy, and finally with Chris.
Thank you. Well, I think it's really important that there's a cross-sector collaboration mindset that will enable no competitive partnerships that recognize the total value creation and enables the whole to grow.
Thank you very much.
Louis, my turn?
Yes, please.
So I agree wholeheartedly with Tommy. So I will take the number 2 position here. We need ICT-enabled tools that allow us to communicate faster and to do things more efficiently in order to be cost-effective and competitive with current production systems. Having the ability to do things, say, let's scan our garment that we're going to be giving away using an iPhone or a cell phone that has a LiDAR scanner that can pick up defects and can be looking out for quality, and could put that together with the intelligence of the current user is really important. So these kind of human AI hybrids, I think, are really going to enable what comes next. Whether that's the user or the sorter, anyone in the supply chain can use those technologies to communicate faster and more efficiently.
Thank you very much, Troy.
Okay, yes, maybe I would like to finish with a suggestion to the retail and distribution sector, because as we've been hearing, it's a sector that will be hit by the circular economy. Some jobs will be destroyed in it. But this is like, you know, without changing the strategy. So this is not written in stone. This can change. And some ways that this could happen in practice is that the retail sector starts to explore other activities that may be related to their current activities, such as repair, such as remanufacturing, refurbishment, and maybe explore collaboration with social economy companies. And in that way, that is a way that maybe employment numbers of that part of the value chain could also be maintained.
Thank you very much, Chris, and thank you all of you for your answers during the panel. I would say that our audience has been really active during the panel discussion. We have plenty of questions here, but unfortunately we are running behind schedule, so I will just take a few of them. I think the best way to do this is to take those questions that are open to the panel as a whole, and we can probably jump in, the two of you, giving your short answers to the question. I will have here from Pamela Foreman. The question is, many points they discuss the technical aspect of change, yet what do you see as the fundamental mindset shifts necessary along the value chain? Who would like to start answering this question? It's open to everyone.
I'll jump in there quickly, Lewis, and perhaps
Yeah.
the others. I think that we have to see clothing as more special. We all drop large amounts of money into our technology these days in terms of our disposable income, where we go and then and buy €5 t-shirts from H&M. So we have to, you know, new clothing should have that specialness to it, that we really have to find a way to bring that back. That creates value throughout the entire chain.
Definitely. Thank you, Troy. Someone else? Okay. I have another question. This is from Elizabeth, also to everyone. How do you see the business models of major retailers, let's say H&M, Zara, changing so that it will fit into the future of the circular economy?
Can I jump on this? I find it the starting point that we see is a transition on the mindset of the end consumer. That is understanding the importance of consuming consciously. We see this on the young education of young adults, the amount, the total amount, the average amount of piece of clothing that they're purchasing now in comparison to 5 years ago, reduced drastically. And that also means that they're looking for items that represent a more sustainable, connected, responsible goods against a better price. So I believe a lot that large retailers, if they don't manage to honestly position themselves into circular transition, they're going to be losing market share drastically. And the same way you comparison to brands, for instance, like Patagonia, that boom their businesses by saying, don't buy my clothing. So I find it's really relevant to look at this comparison, what is happening in the growth of sustainable fashion and the understanding of the consumer. So these large retailers will have to take a real positioning against repair. And I think a big challenge there is the unit value of the items is so low that it's difficult for you to establish added value, added working value on this. So there's the whole thing. We have to shift the whole industry as a whole, the industry as a whole.
Definitely. Thank you, Tammy. Chris, would you like to add something?
Yes, maybe I can supplement. It's an important question also because in the study, we did not answer that question because we just assumed that if we go to a circular economy, what would be the impact? We did not ask the question, how can we get there? That's for other studies, but obviously it's a really important question. And I hope that Tammy is right, suggesting that like consumers and the market will make will force the brands to adapt and to become more circular and more sustainable. But probably my feeling is that, like Troy said, in order to make people feel that clothing is more special, then I think price will be an important factor. As long as it's cheap as it is today, we will not see it as something special. So I think some policies are needed to switch relative prices to make that balance more sustainable.
Definitely, you are absolutely right, Chris. We didn't answer that question. Probably that's for putting circular textiles toward 2.0. I think it's time to start closing our event. I will very briefly put my slides on again. Let me see if you can see my screen now. Perfect. Sorry about that, just technical issues. Doesn't matter, I can just move on without presenting my slides. I just wanted to conclude with some closing remarks about the research project as a whole, and just inviting you to visit our website. First of all, I mean, I think this topic was important for circular economy and for the people that is researching to the circular economy, because this industry is considered a top polluter in terms of waste and greenhouse gas emissions. Apparently, it contributes to around 5% of the total global GHG emissions. So I think in order to overcome this challenge and to make possible a full circular clothing value chain, it is necessary collaboration and coordination of all the relevant actors that form part of this industry. We already mentioned that the big companies are really important here. Government plays a crucial role as well. The academia plays a really important role as well. And obviously the social sectors are really important for us as well here. I think we are in front of a great opportunity to start walking the path of a circular economy. But I think it's important to act now, not to wait any longer. I would like to invite all of you to check our website and to read our report. It's available for free for all of you. Also, we have other important resources for you. We have the Circular Jobs Monitor, where you can have a look at the percentage of jobs that the Netherlands and other regions in Europe have as circular jobs. And also we have the Knowledge Hub, when you can find different resources for different industries and policy tools if you want to analyze what's going on, what's happening with the circular economy in this moment in terms of policy making process and also in terms of research. Without any further comment, I would like to conclude the event here. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here. Thank you so much, Natalia, for your presentation. And to our three panel experts, thank you so much for joining us, obviously to our audience as well. Thank you and have a good day.